Hi guys, Dayna, Grayson here at NEA. We're a large venture capital fund, and we have been lucky enough to invest in several industrial and automation companies, mostly here in the Boston area. So it's really great to see this turnout today. I'm really curious to hear mostly questions from you guys when we get to that portion of the event. But this panel is, the topic of this panel is Agile manufacturing, and we have a number of people, both operators right in the manufacturing space, operators in the design space, and investors who happen to also invest in the manufacturing space. I'm going to go down the line here. I might stand up too. We have John Hirschtick at OnShape. He's the CEO and co-founder of OnShape. Sandeep, actually going in line. Etienne, Lacroix here. We of course did not sit in the order in which the slide is, but just to confuse you all, there will be a quiz at the end. Etienne Lacroix at Vention, Sandeep at Vertex, and Leif at Right Hand Robotics. So why don't we take just a few minutes? We have about an hour, so we'll have everyone introduce themselves and then have some questions and discussion amongst the panel, and then open it up to you guys. If you do have any burning question along the way, we can kind of check midway through and poll the audience as well. But to start off, John, do you want to give a quick intro of yourself and OnShape for those who don't know you?
Sure. Thanks, Dayna. So as Dayna said, I'm John Hirschtick. I've been building tools for product development for almost 40 years. The origin at OnShape, we make a full cloud platform of product development tools, including CAD, data management, workflow, collaboration, bill of material, and so forth. This tool set is unified in the cloud, and we built it because we saw the problems people had with the old tool sets that we built, typically software, discrete software apps that are installed, and those apps communicate by copying files. And that's what we built in our old lives. And we saw an opportunity to replace that with a unified cloud platform, and that's what we've done with OnShape. We're the only full cloud platform like it. All the tools are available in the cloud. The data's all in a database. There's no copying, no files. The result, thousands of companies now have purchased OnShape to use our tool set, and the results, the reasons they do it are speed, time to market, raising innovation levels and collaboration through usually agile process in one form or another, which is something we'll talk about more. Also efficiency of money and people's time in setting up, configuring, deploying the systems. And increasingly security is another issue. Security and compliance comes up. And our tool set extends easily into shop floor manufacturing, one of the themes we'll talk about today.
I'm Etienne. I'm the founder and CEO of Vention. For those that don't know Vention, we are industrial Lego. We are a mix of hardware and software. And since the model is a little bit complex to explain, we're going to show a little 1-minute video. And hopefully there's sound. There's no sound, so I will comment, which is even better.
Oh, there is.
So we let people design in their web browsers using a library of modular parts, really Lego blocks. They all designed to fit with one another, so we can do beautiful things in terms of automating the next part that come into the assembly and guide the users to the assembly process. We give the the assembly time in real time, the cost in real time. You can also program your entire equipment in your web browser in a code-free interface, which means anybody on the shop floor can now not only design, but also program their automated equipment. And when they're done, they can either order, but also push that code they just created straight to the shop floor without installing or downloading anything. This is basically from the ideation to a delivered, fully functioning automated equipment as fast as 3 days, including delivery of the equipment. So we provide speed and simplicity in the world of manufacturing.
It's hard to follow that. Hi, my name is Sandeep. I'm at Vertex Ventures. We're an early stage venture capital firm. primarily focused on the impact of software and data in a variety of industries and changing the nature of how work is done, by professionals in a variety of industries where, collecting, analyzing, sharing, collaborating data is going to become more and more important in driving value.
Thank you, Sandeep. My name is...
And I'm an investor in Chile.
My name is Leif Jentoft. I'm a co-founder at Right Hand Robotics. We're focused on intelligent robotic picking systems. One of the big changes that we've seen in automation, it used to be you'd have a fixed part presented the same way a million times in a row. In today's industry, the industry is changing much too quickly, and especially in the logistics space, there's been a major challenge trying to find qualified labor to be able to fulfill the items. No one aspires to be a piece picker in a warehouse, whether that's kitting parts for line-side delivery or fulfilling an e-commerce order. And so our systems here are really designed to alleviate that.
Some said it was impossible, this holy grail of material handling automation. A robot will never pick and handle millions of different items in a warehouse. It won't be fast enough. It'll be too complicated, unreliable, and no one could afford it if it worked. Introducing RightPick 2, the first autonomous piece-picking solution for modern intralogistics. With the range, rate, and reliability, the 3 R's of robotic piece picking, leveraging Right Hand's Gripper V5, an intelligent grasping system, now with 2 kilogram payload capacity. Featuring Universal Robot's E-Series cobots for simplicity and flexibility. Equipped with the Intel RealSense Depth Camera D415 for precise measurements and low cost. And a new generation core processor running RightPick AI, providing intelligence and machine learning with every system. RightPick 2 delivers more of what you need most. Reliable picking from the first item, even from small bins, to the very last. Gently handling items using a combination of suction and compliant fingers. RightPick captures barcodes and integrates with the widest range of new and existing material handling systems via RightPick MCP, an industry-first standard software API for robotic piece-picking systems. With RightPick, you can pick from a range of goods-to-person systems,
The video here
conduct the
goes on to talk
sortation
about warehouse
systems,
processes.
sort
We can
to a
skip the rest
put
of it
wall,
here.
pick
But
single
at the end
items.
of the day, it's simple systems picking things up and putting them down.
Simple systems. Okay, here we go. Thanks, guys. Those are great intros. So you can see we have a range from design to robotics to assembly to investing. And I guess the first question I have for you guys, maybe John, I'll start with you. Agile manufacturing, lean manufacturing, how does that tie into design? Where does design feed into that? Why is it so important to get that right to begin with?
Okay, so I think when we talk about Agile, and Agile means something different everywhere I've seen it done, but it always means more iterations faster, more change in the same period of time. It's sort of like, I think of Agile as the difference between like launching a ballistic projectile is the old process. You'd say, okay, we're aiming 1,000 miles away and we're gonna launch this thing and off it goes, and we'll, if we're 1 degree off when we aim it, we'll be on the wrong continent, but let's try it anyway. This big process of years, that's the way you used to see it. Today, Agile is more like a guided system, like a torpedo that's constantly pinging and going a little distance and saying, where are we, change course, where are we, change course. And so as we know, and how many of you took controls in engineering school? If you want a high performing system, you sample at what rate? A higher rate, right? Smaller, if you're trying to build a control system. And that's what Agile's about, tying it to something in engineering. So it's about greater iteration and change that's more constant and checking in. And that's what happened in the software industry. That's what's happening in the hardware industry. How does it tie into us? You can't have those kinds of fast changing teams, fast iterations, unless you have the tools for it. And the old tool sets are problematic with Agile. You can't add new people easily. You're looking at out-of-date information. Cloud-based systems like our platform extend the design and manufacturing team to work together in real time. And we see that in a lot of our customers where literally, everyone on the shop floor has an iPad and they're not looking at last week's information. They're looking at this moment's information, and that fuels, those are the tools, the building blocks people need for these Agile, fast changing, fast iterating processes.
Yeah, maybe we can ask the other founders on the panel too about Agile as it relates to, robotics and to assembly, and also sort of the role of software that you guys see playing in that stream.
I'll build on John's perspective, bringing the discussion to the manufacturing floor. When I was a young mechanical engineer, I used to design manufacturing floor equipment for like a 20-year shelf life. And this isn't true anymore because the product life cycle is much shorter than it used to be. Car platform lasts 3.5 years. Most electronic products last for around 24 months. What means that the manufacturing floor is always changing, right? The time window you have to kind of buy an asset, depreciate that asset, and move to the next thing is much shorter than it used to be. So you cannot spend as much time, designing, then investing, then commissioning that piece of custom manufacturing on the floor than you used to. And that changed the entire rules of the game, right? You cannot afford to spend 4 months just designing and then 3 months manufacturing and then maybe 8 months later you have this piece of asset. It doesn't make sense when the shelf life of your product is 24 months. There's no way you're going to generate any ROI. So that changed everything. The economics of Agile basically force you to design product, put it on a shelf floor in just a few months. And that wasn't true just even like 7 years ago.
We certainly see the same thing both in warehouses and where our robots are used. If you're trying to design a process for something that's going to last 20 years, spending 3 years of design time, finding the numbers, gathering the data, trying to optimize based on the data makes sense. The problem is that the business doesn't stay stable for 20 years. And so if you're putting in a new warehouse, investing that energy into making something you can reconfigure in terms of systems that you can repurpose from this type of item to the next type of item instantly is really where the benefit is, because those course corrections for their torpedo matter an awful lot more than getting the right trajectory to begin with.
Maybe you could also talk, I'll just let you keep the mic if everyone can hear me. Maybe you could also talk about Agile, because logistics. It's not just about manufacturing and design.
Definitely. I think if you look at the logistics processes that people are using right now, folks are focused very much on how do you get closer to the customer. The Amazon breathing down everyone's nose, the speed with which you can deliver a product, and also the speed with which you can ramp up to meet a demand has been enormous. You look at how Zara's invested heavily in having a very, very short design to fulfillment cycle. That's happening through the whole supply chain right now, where the customer experience for an online company is, did I get what I ordered? Did I get it quickly? Was it easy to find? That did I get it quickly is really, really critical. And so for the warehouses, this is putting them under a catastrophic shift, where it used to be you'd set up a building, you'd have $150 million investment, and then, oh gosh, Amazon put in a warehouse next to us and they're paying $15 an hour for labor. And so the ability to have a cell that you can move from one location to the next location, you can reconfigure from one place to another workflow as the order profile changes. When you open up online and suddenly the shipping is cheap, and now instead of your order profile being 10 items per order, it's 1.2 items per order. That's really, really critical. So I think it's the same story across the board.
Maybe, Sandeep, I'm going to give you the microphone right back. You're an investor in the space. You're an investor in Tulip, as am I, and others here. But you've also kind of been observing the industry as a whole, and I'm sure Agile and some of these changes have influenced your interest in the space. How do you see? We'll talk about these guys on the panel, and then we'll also talk about the guys in the audience and how their business changes. But how do you see startups kind of taking advantage of this change, and what are you looking for there?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm, all right, yeah. I probably don't need this. I'm probably most excited about the idea of SaaS, and I was just talking about this with John a few minutes ago, in a variety of sort of disparate industries where to date, most of the existing technology has been sort of client-server, on-prem installation, or even hybrid installation. The shift to the cloud, I think, impacts product development as much as it impacts sort of sales and go-to-market. And I can just talk about it for like a few minutes for why I'm so excited about manufacturing as one of these spaces, right? So fundamentally, what does SaaS software do? It means that the IT team at the customer is no longer responsible for the caring and feeding of that software to make sure that it's up, to make sure that all the patches are installed, to make sure that it is compatible with every endpoint, to make sure that users are happy with it. Instead, all of that responsibility is devolved to the software vendor who is managing this piece of software for you as a service. So what that means is, on the one end, it's easier to get started without having central IT involved in the decision making, right? And so it means that the market of users of these complex pieces of software suddenly increases to the shadow market of future customers that would have bought a piece of software, but couldn't because they did not have a large IT team to care and feed for it, but now they can just get going and start, right? And you know, this creates a fundamental political sort of change in organizations that buy software that we've seen, you know, in other industries as well. And so what that means is that the IT team's focus goes from, you know, being an operator, so to feed and care for software, to actually helping business units, you know, write code or develop software or enhance the software to serve business needs. That's sort of one piece. And then the other piece is that the software vendor creates a direct relationship with the end user. So rather than being intermediated through IT in understanding, hey, what do my end users want? Salesforce does not need to, like, you know, for instance, you know, sit with central IT to understand what a salesperson wants, right? Atlassian does not need to sit with central IT to understand, you know, what a developer wants. And I think companies like Tulip don't need to sit with central IT to understand what you, a process engineer, might want from your lines, basically. I think that drives a direct relationship between users and the software vendor, and that drives agility in how quickly these software companies can iterate and, you know, be a guiding missile and figure out, you know, what users actually want. And I think that fundamentally transforms the way and the quality of software, and it's no longer checkboxes and integrations, but it's about the user experience. And two, in the long run, it becomes easier for these software companies to become platforms. Imagine if you had a piece of software and then third parties were writing pieces of software on top of your piece of software. Now imagine the burden on central IT to care and feed for that. So, you know, like Oracle had armies of people responsible for training IT people, or Cisco, to make sure that the people writing the apps on top of their platform were A, qualified such that the apps would last for a very long time and would be stable. But B, it was a tremendous pain in the neck for Oracle or for any of the platform providers to ensure that the pieces of software that third-party developers were writing on their platform would run exactly as specified on the plethora of endpoints and on the plethora of, like, customer environments. SaaS changes that completely, because all of a sudden there's only one version of the software, which is the version that, you know, that the vendor is selling. And now building sort of dev platform, transforming it into a dev platform and building applications on top of that becomes all the more easier. And so these companies can transform in the long run to being platforms as well. I mean, that's where we're excited. And we think that there's, like, many opportunities within industrial manufacturing writ large, you know, where this is happening. I mean, this is obviously, you know, the case for design, right? But it's very likely going to happen elsewhere as well.
So that's a huge vision of the future and something we all hope will happen and get there. Let's talk about now sort of baby steps to getting there, both adopting the technology, moving to the cloud, using SaaS software. What can you tell the audience here, and I'll throw this out to anyone, so just raise your hand if you want to answer, but about short-term ROI, short-term gains, how quickly will they get payback? How do they justify payback? We've all heard stories of companies that pilot and, you know, deploy in micro ways software only to never see it really roll out to a broader usage inside your own companies. Is that a good thing or a bad thing for you, and how do you avoid that in kind of using you guys as products? Anybody?
I will partially answer your question.
Please, there's a lot of
And it started with, if, you know, your question started by, you know, what's the first step, right? And the first step to me is, who is more susceptible to adopt Agile? And this is actually a question we had at Vention, because we were wondering, what is the easiest place we could sell? I love data. Unfortunately, I'm an ex-McKinsey, so I love looking into all the data that is accessible to me. And so we've tried to look at that question. And the only thing we found is people shifting to Agile are people in short life cycle industries. And it took us a while to look at this, because this is not like the first derivative of the data you get, but we start to realize that folks in aerospace, well, they don't move fast. Folks in defense, well, they don't really move fast either. Folks in electronics, okay, now they start to move a little bit faster. So it was really, and then you talk to those guys, you're trying to understand the pain point they're trying to solve, and it's completely different than if you speak to somebody who's in aerospace. So you can almost draw a line, right, between pace of reaction. For us, we measure the time it takes them to create a design and order it, which is almost like how agile they are. The times to the delivery of that equipment versus the industry's life cycle they're in. And it's pretty much a straight line. So you want to know who's more susceptible to adopt agile is folks that are under pressure because their product is always changing. And using the old rule, the kind of a ballistic missile way of doing things, simply doesn't work when your endpoint is always changing. So we saw a lot of rapid adoption in those industry, in those companies.
We also see something similar where a lot of these times it's hard to scale change because it impacts many things, and you have something that's new that could provide a big benefit. For the programs that we've seen to be most successful so far with customers, there's a large opportunity that's been identified. The data around what could we make a difference on this has been captured, and that's what's used to drive the initial pilots. Not all that looks fancy glitters, and so there's a lot of cool things you could do that don't have any large pot of gold at the end of the rainbow after you solve all the questions along the way. But the organizations that we've seen moving most quickly are the ones that can identify these are the large opportunities where there's a large cost involved. We'd like to see what we can do to prove out specific questions towards that end. And so, it might be that robotic picking is faster than a person, or it might be that robotic picking is more reliable than a person. Then they can qualify, let's answer these questions first because we think those matter most, and then we'll answer the later questions later. And so I think someone once said, don't boil the ocean. We see the Agile and in general, how do you innovate new technologies really being a function of how well you can set up the sequence. So you're not boiling the ocean, but you're working towards a large opportunity.
I have a few thoughts on taking the steps. First is obviously you have to pick a project to try us on, any of our systems, and that's kind of obvious. But what tends to happen, I think, is it's easy to look at any of our solutions and pull out a feature matrix and say, well, what's the feed, speeds, cost, or whatever. You won't understand Agile in a feature matrix. This is one of the things, unfortunately, until you jump into the pool and try it. I know that was the case for me as a software vendor. I see both sides of the world because we build software, and over the last 20 years, we went from this kind of very non-Agile way of building software. Most of you wouldn't even remember of this SEI process and all this. And then these new tools and processes came along like Agile, and if you try to evaluate it based on the parameters you're familiar with, we're not just another vendor of assembly equipment or just another robot or just another piece of CAD or PDM. You have to sort of say, what can I use these tools for to change my process and how we work? And you won't measure that in a feature chart, and you won't understand it till you try it. You can try to understand it. And also get our help, because again, if you just try your same old process, if you try to insert any of our products in the same process, it might or might not be a good idea, but you won't really understand it. This light bulb goes on when you live Agile, and that's what happened in the software world, is you really do have to take a leap with a project and live it. I had to laugh there. Etienne said, oh, it's only, it's most applicable for people who are on tight deadline with changes happening all the time, right? And I kind of laugh because that's how I feel too, and I think that's kind of like 100% of people these days. I don't know about you guys, like especially in this audience, I laugh because people say which projects are best for OnShape, and I say, well, are you on a tight deadline and trying to make changes quickly? People who have all the time in the world, but there aren't any businesses like that because we all have competitors, and so anyway, that's.
I have another question that many of you might have answers to, and we'd actually like to hear many of your responses. Talking about the workforce and how you guys think you're selling the software, but how you think about who, maybe advice to the room here of how you hire. What's the future of hiring in this space going to look like? What kind of skill sets do you need to optimize for, and how has that changed?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, this is a great question, Dayna. I'm glad you brought up workforce, because the workforce is changing, as you all know, and the newly emerging entrants to the workforce. By the way, we never talk about anyone's age when we talk about employees, you know, but we can say people earlier in their career, okay, who are coming out of school now, they have vastly different expectations about IT and systems. So you know, as the executive in charge of design software, you know, CAD and PDM at a very large company, you would recognize. They said to me, the CTO came in and said, we can't hire anyone cool with the systems we have, because you get these young people come in, and you say, oh, we're putting in global collaboration. They're like, I globally collaborate every day on Xbox. You know, my kids do. I have 6 kids, so I see all this, ranging from college to teenager, and they wouldn't get any of the systems that are mostly in use. You know, buying things the way that Etienne showed, that would just be natural to them. They wouldn't say, wow, they'd say, oh, of course this is how it should work, right? Using OnShape would be, of course this is how it should work. So you're going to find the young people walk in, they won't know what a save button is. They won't know what installing software is, okay? Those days are over. They walk in with their MacBook Pro and their iPad and their Xbox Daily Global Collaboration, and they're sort of thinking, this is what they expect to see, and you have to see the world through their lens. They're naturally collaborative, naturally mobile, naturally fast-moving, sort of naturally agile. We're raising a new generation of workers who are growing up in a societal life where agile is the norm. And then they're going to hit our old-fashioned tools that, you know, we upgrade every 3 years and install on our Windows boxes and copy files here and there and fill out forms for purchasing, you know, and it's going to be a bad collision. So. Companies that take advantage of the modern workforce entering will have a great advantage.
You know, one thing I very often tell our client is manufacturing is now cool again, right? And if you go back to the early 2000s, manufacturing was super boring. It was not scalable. There was no cool software. No, you know, it was, and as a result, you had pretty much lack of talent. I've been passionate about manufacturing since I'm probably 11-year-old, but I was probably one of the only one. Even when I started Vention, I was presenting Vention to clients and VCs, and says, "You're doing what? Industrial equipment?" And now manufacturing is cool because there's data, and when there's data, it means there's scale, and that means when there's data and scale, you need a different type of talent, right? You need manufacturing engineers that can speak that languages, that are comfortable running SQL queries to find patterns, that are comfortable, you know, doing multivariable correlation. So you can unlock pockets of values in your manufacturing business. Nowhere before, the only scale you had in manufacturing was 24 hours in a day, and the next day it start over. So the amount of parts you can cram in a day was pretty much limited. But now with data, you can find pockets of unlocking exponential growth. So the type of talent manufacturing business needs to hire is very different. You need to start about hiring very data-savvy folks that know both worlds, the old world and new world. And it creates a shift because those individuals don't work at all in the same way as traditional industrialists. They arrive at 10 a.m., they clock at 12 p.m., they want to have free food, and in a lot of like small and medium businesses, this is totally not the culture. The culture is not yet ready to receive those individuals. So there's an adjustment period that is required, but the great news is manufacturing is cool again.
I think in terms of sort of what we see as sort of the changing workforce, I think the biggest difference is that we're all used to using consumer software and collaborating and you know, having workflows in our lives, in our personal lives, with our cousins when we're planning a vacation, with our friends. You know, we do sports betting on online platforms today, you know, which is something that guys used to do around a couple of beers. And so I think that every aspect of our life is sort of digitized, and I think people expect the same at work. I think that's one. Two, I think everybody's a programmer. You know, like at least everybody below a certain age has had certain amount of essential programming at high school or at college. And all of a sudden you have all of these people with the skills to program and the desire to automate processes that they see at work. And I think the best way to hire and retain these people is to provide the tools that allow them to, you know, get started with that easily, you know, which is like, you know, where you don't need to spin up a huge project to get started. And two, to be able to do it in a low-code or a no-code fashion, right? You know, such that you can quickly program it and then, like, you know, you can see the results of it very instantly. I think that that's probably like one of the biggest changes that is coming to the workforce, even in manufacturing on the shop floor, is this ability to be able to be programmable in your processes, to be able to quickly experiment and throw away bad ideas and keep the good ones. And to be able to encourage young people to come up with ways in which to experiment and ways in which to sort of evolve processes, which are well codified in like industrial engineering practice, but now is perhaps a time to sort of take them and sort of build software tooling and processes around them, right?
Thank you. We also see as well the types of labor, at least warehouses, have never been sexy. I think maybe that's starting to change. Robots always have been, for better or for worse. And one of the things that we see as well is if you're trying to find and attract these people to do it, that's the defining characteristic of this industry. If you've got your spare parts warehouse, that's often industry average is 36% annual turnover. We've talked to warehouses where it's as high as 300% on a given year. And so as you give people good tools, you can attract much better people. You abstract away the bad parts of the job. No, this is existential.
Yeah. Maybe what we'll do is poll the audience really quickly. Any burning questions or any questions at all? And if not, I have some more for these guys, but would love to hear what's on your minds. One right here in front. Do I need to mic them?
No, I think pretty small room. Sure, yeah. So for more rigid types of industries, does Agile manufacturing have a role or not, where product life cycles are really long, there's like much less competition, things of that nature, and the rules and regulations from the government kind of confine you to doing things certain ways and improving it out robustly. So is there a spot for Agile manufacturing in those types of industries?
So for those of you, I don't know if everyone could hear in the back, but his question was for older, more rigid industries that are regulated and somewhat less competitive with longer development cycles. How do you actually fit Agile into that, and does it fit?
Well, I think that that everyone has a goal. Everyone's trying to improve something, and you're here. I mean, even if you're looking at Tulip, you're trying to improve something, and it may not be that you're introducing a new product at this pace in this kind of industry that I guess you're in, but you're looking to make some improvement, and there's always an authority that's putting pressure on you to do something. It could be to improve quality and yield. It could be to reduce cost, right? It could be to improve security is a timely subject, or reliability. And so somewhere you're under some vector, and that's, like I said earlier, Agile process is kind of like a culture. It's a way, it's not a rigid process. That's the whole point. It's a way of thinking that says, move quickly, evaluate where you are, make changes, faster and in a sense more agilely. And so again, I'd say, I don't know which industry you're talking about, but also what's happening is companies are going to find, I spoke to a company recently that's like, oh well, we manage our environment very well, and we're just about to upgrade to Windows 8 or something. I can't make this stuff up. I see it in my world. And what's going to happen is these industries that think they control everything, some of them are going to realize that changes need to be made in how they approach things. But anyway, my message back is there's some coin of the realm. There's some goal you're shooting for. And I have not run into any situation where Agile thinking today and using more modern tools couldn't help achieve some sort of goal of the organization, even if it's not the fast-moving new product every month kind of scenarios that you think we're all trading in all the time.
I think I would totally support what John just said. I think just the battle, as a change leader, let's say, that want to push Agile in a long life cycle industries, the battle you're going to take will be a little bit bigger, because it's not only about changing how you work, but also changing how your colleagues work, and how procurement works, and how approval works, right? So you're going to take a bigger battle. So think about which are Agile is a very large toolkit. You have a lot of tools in there. So think about the first few pockets of success you can have, so you can have quick win, and they'll mobilize others. But the bigger the organization, the longer the life cycle of the products, the bigger battle you'll have. But it's totally possible. There's pockets of opportunities everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, So let's forget about manufacturing for a second, right? Let's talk about pharma R&D, right? Which is one of the most regulated industries, where drugs last for a decade, under patent protection. There's tremendous cost pressure there, even at the R&D cycle, not the manufacturing in pharma, to actually do better and to do it for cheaper and for, as opposed to costing $2.5 billion on average to bring a drug to market. And so, irrespective of sort of the product life cycle, I think improvements in processes internally can drive cost improvements and can drive sort of better outcomes, even for the same cost structure oftentimes. And I think that the Agile process enables that, even if the end product itself is not changing rapidly. Of course, it is vitally important if you have sort of high mix or rapidly changing product. I mean, that's absolutely necessary. But even for industries where the product life cycle is long, you could make tremendous changes in cost and in operations, and all of that goes to the bottom line. So, I mean, even in regulated industries, CFOs are paying attention to this.
Okay, any other questions for now? All right, okay. Well, we'll come back to the audience, so be thinking of some. I want to talk a little bit about self-serve technology. And when we saw the SaaS industry kind of hit the professional world of whether it's computing or B2B software services, you see marketing managers kind of sign up for things online and start using it, and then they brought cascade through the organization that way. That's harder to do in a manufacturing shop floor for sure, but even in some of your IT organizations and whatnot. Can anyone here talk about self-serve and how that fits, whether it's the right thing to do, whether it's hard to do, and what level of sort of top-down buy-in you need to get to implement Agile?
Well, I guess I have a number of thoughts on that. Great question on self-serve. First is, in any organization, you're always making trade-offs between the benefits of standardization and the benefits of choosing the best tool for the job, and those are trade-offs you have to make. I think people err too much on the standardization. I don't just say that because it's self-serving to be an OnShape. I really believe that, and we in our company, we try to subscribe to that because taking advantage of the latest tools is important. So like, for instance, we get new employees, we say choose your computer. We say you pick MacBook, Windows, Linux machine, Chromebook. Guess what? Now we have employees picking Chromebooks, and it turns out those are very interesting for lots of reasons. Highly secure, by the way. More secure than centralizing and saying, well, we'll use this version of Windows or something. Anyway, sometimes you can do that, sometimes you can't. But the other thing to think about is self-serve within an organization. Just to point out, like once you've chosen a system and you say, we've standardized in this, how easy is it for a user to get access to it? How easy is it to scale that system? Because Agile is not only always changing ideas, and designs or manufacturing plans, it's also always changing organizations. New people come on and off, outsourcing, insourcing, and so forth. And so what's happening now is you're seeing, I'm taking your question about self-serve, within an organization you standardize, like on a platform like ours, or Salesforce, Workday, Zendesk, NetSuite. These things all are super easy to add, remove, and control users, super easy to provision and deprovision, super easy to say to someone starting a new project, here's how you add users, here's how you add, here's how you extend your Tulip system to a new line you're putting together, and it's easy. It's not ordering for 3 weeks and getting license codes and installs and calling people out to deal with all that stuff. It's just sort of like it is. So even if you're standardizing, self-serve can be really important to distribute in an organization in a fast way to get that project up and running with Tulip or with Vention. I don't know about right hand how that applies to you, but certainly with Tulip, Vention, OnShape, there's a big benefit to that too.
There's if you rewind back just probably 7 years in the manufacturing industries, it was a big news. Universal robots arrive, and Universal Robot changed robotics forever because it was the first robot you can actually buy and deploy by yourself with no former robotic trainings. And since that day, there's a lot of companies that use the word democratization. Vention is definitely one of them. But democratization is the word that, in those years, any manufacturing product was being sold based on performance of the product. Now, you see companies like Tulips, like Vention, like others, that are being sold on the ease of use and democratization they provide because they are self-serve play. We want to empower any manufacturing professional to actually do a dent, improve their own processes without going to a very complex, get trained first, then you're good enough, then train others, then start to use the tool. It just takes forever. So the word of manufacturing is changing, and democratization is definitely the theme. For those of you that were at Automate this year, I think the word democratization was used by CEO, and CTO, I think around like 15 companies. That was actually in their keynote speaker. So this is definitely a trend. Manufacturing technology is getting way easier than it used to be, so anybody on the shop floor can actually use it.
You guys use...
We certainly use the arms ourselves. For that reason, the universal robots have been amazing. Amazing to work with. I think definitely agree too. One of the things we've noticed is oftentimes the people that are closest to the problem have the best insights as to what you need to do to try and solve it. Logistics as an industry is still moving towards that direction.
That's an Agile method. That's an Agile principle, by the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's an important Agile principle.
And so we do see that when you can have a technology that's made simple enough that someone can understand what to do with it, pick things up and put them down, then people think of ways of using that you never thought of that are still creating customer value. And how do you make a system polished enough that it's easy for those people to use is very, very important.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the beauty of SaaS is that it creates this direct relationship between the vendor of the software and the user of the software without having anybody else being the intermediary. And then two, I think it also sort of behooves of SaaS companies to have user interface UX design, right? Design in a different sense, John, to actually make sure that you're collecting and you're onboarding users as fast as possible onto your platform, and you're collecting continuous feedback on which features are useful, which features are not useful, which workflows are useful, which workflows are not useful. I think that Agile methodology I think is brilliant in the context of self-serve software, right?
Any other questions from the audience? Well, maybe what we'll do, we have just a few minutes left, kind of go down the panel here and give your one or two best recommendations for someone like this gentleman in the front, or whether it's working in a large organization that's very unlikely to be able to adopt this stuff quickly, or whether they're just scratching the surface. What is your best recommendation for how to get started, either organizationally wise, how to work within your organization to do it, what to try first? Go take it wherever you want with the answer to that question.
I'll just echo what I said earlier. Jump in and try a project. Pick a project, a new team, something going on. It can be a small project, but try a project where you'll experience the power of the whole benefit. Don't just look at a spreadsheet of features like you're swapping one of us out for what you think is the old substitute. Really understand it. And by the way, think about your competitor. One of you is going to try these things first. One of you is going to learn what the new emerging workforce can do with these tools first, and one of you is going to learn second. And be the ones who learn first.
The cost of trying those experiments is pretty much zero now, right? You go on OnShape, put your email, you can try it. You go on Vention, same thing, put your email address, you can design the whole thing, you won't be charged a dime. So the cost of trying those new tools, same thing for Tulips. You can go on Tulips, you try it out right now. So the cost of trying is very, very low. So do an experiment, try it for yourself. You can basically materialize and envision the entire stream of benefit for your business without having to spend a dime, and then you can decide if it's right for you.
Yeah, time to hello world, is really small, and so you can go on Tulips' website, order a factory kit or use the freeware, and you can use a manufacturing app and get started with one small project and pick a project that drives ROI for your organization. And yeah, I think the cost point is such that you probably only need departmental level approval rather than a central approval to actually get started and demonstrate ROI for yourself and to see whether it drives utility for you, yourself, and your colleagues. I think that that experience, trying it, right, I think is fundamental to deriving the value out of this, out of any agile software, quite frankly, in manufacturing.
If you're looking at a lot of these tasks and reaching out to get input on them, a short video of the thing you're trying to do is incredibly powerful. You can share that to any expert who's a domain expert, and they'll have a good sense of these are the questions you need to answer. Can you separate this process out so it's done downstream? Is this a process that's a critical one? What is the value you're trying to prove? So if you're reaching out to companies to say, would this technology be a good fit, a short video shared is one of the most powerful tools around. A really good way of getting a project kicked off.
Thank you, guys. This was a great panel. Enjoyed the discussion. We'll call it here, but we have a few minutes left, so for questions, individual questions, if you want to come up. Oh, we've got one in the back. Okay.
I think people here are generally sold on Agile, but from a top-down perspective, but sometimes people are just resistant to change, and they don't like change. So can you talk about sort of how, if you talk about starting Agile from the top up and bottom, everyone needs to be bought in. So how do you sort of create solidarity and get people on board with the process of actually getting Agile from the idea to process?
The beauty about self-serve is that you don't need top-down approval. You can have one advocate, one change advocate in your organization that can start to use OnShape or start to use Vention or Tulips and see materialize the business case for the company and then involve somebody else. But those are the beauty of those platforms is you actually don't need top-down approval. So the ability, again, to try before you invest is much easier than it was ever before. So, just have, you need one change leader. You just need to convince 20 before getting started, right?
This was great, but my quick reaction is it's not only that we make SaaS tools that are self-serve and people can try themselves and all that. That's great, but our SaaS tools they're just data-driven. So what I've learned in the decade I've spent in advanced manufacturing space is that you don't go to shop floor and start telling people and showing them slides and nobody cares. Seriously, it's like seeing is believing. And because all our tools collect all this data and measure them, and we're pretty good at pushing this data out, you let this advocate take that data, fashion it, and show back the results pretty much immediately. We're all using web-based technologies, and they're very, for better or worse. Let's not get into the ethical discussion how we are the product, but the web is really designed to measure us. It's also good to measure our work, and this is sort of a little bit of how do you use that technology to use numbers to convince people. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you, guys. All right, well, these guys will hang out up here for the next 2 or 3 minutes, and if you have any individual questions, feel free to come up.